call a spade a spade. Today is 4th March 2025, and call a spade is looking into a looming disaster in the whole world. A catastrophe with extremely far reaching consequences, not just to Kenya, but in the whole world. 2 days ago, the refugees living in Kenya's biggest refugee camp, the Kakuma camp, which hosts over 300,000 refugees from countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi, Somalia, the DRC, South Sudan, and many other countries. And these people were protesting over a severe shortage of the essential resources. We're talking about food and water, healthcare services, and other services that they get from the providers of these services, the organizations, and the donors, the well wishers, everyone who contributes there, really. And this protest basically elicits the catastrophe that the whole world is facing right now.
Security in Kakuma refugee camp in northwestern Kenya on Monday, with police firing live bullets and injuring at least 4 protesters, according to local media. The protests erupted over food and water shortages in the camp. They come as humanitarian aid in Kenya has been reduced following funding cuts from the US Agency for International Development, USAID. The camp, which is one of the largest in the world, is home to around 200,000 refugees and asylum seekers. Since Donald Trump became US president, now Kenyans have shifted all the blame on him. Workers are not getting paid, and it's blamed on Trump. No medication in hospital. It's Trump. Now we have to pay for school fees, and it's Trump. Everything is Trump. We're tired of Trump. So if Trump can hear us, we're getting humiliated here because of him. So let him stop that and release our things so that we can stop being humiliated. This is for others and oil. This is used. This is the equivalent for 1 month of food when you eat. We don't have other income somewhere. It's only this. Is this enough for you? Imagine if you think that there's not enough, then please help us for this. This condition has affected us for so long. Without alternative sources of funding, there are concerns that the situation in the camp could spiral further out of control.
The US, after the Trump second presidency, through the America First policy, has been cutting funds across the world, talking about the USAID and many other aids that the people of the US have been giving to the world. You know that the US withdrew from the WHO, and now they cut funding for the WFP as well, the World Food Program. And the World Food Program actually closed its operations or offices in the southern part of Africa. And now the WFP will be merging with its Eastern and Central African operating centers. They'll be merging into one operational center, and that will be running from Nairobi.
Program WFP of the United Nations will close its Southern African office due to financial constraints. Typically, the US contributes around half of WFP's yearly funding, but it is currently scaling back on foreign aid as part of President Donald Trump's America First policy. Thomson Phiri, a regional spokesperson, announced that WFP will combine its Eastern and Southern African operations in Nairobi, but this will not affect ongoing support for millions in Southern Africa facing drought. He noted the importance of maximizing resources, but did not directly link the changes to the cuts in aid, stating that the overall funding outlook is tighter. The Trump administration plans to cut over 90% of foreign aid contracts from the US Agency for International Development.
And basically, we're talking about the extremes of the lack of the basic resources which sustain these refugee camps and many other facilities that provide emergency services to the people affected by war and natural calamities and any other sort of disaster. And this is the point. I want us to look into the cause and the effect of these events that we're talking about here, the protests themselves, and even the events that happen that bring about the refugee crisis that we're talking about. The world lately has been waking up to the realization that wars and conflicts are a commercial enterprise, a business venture, an economic activity. And whether you're talking about the industrial military complex or its associates or its affiliates or any other complex out there that exploits the political instability in a country or in a region to create wars to just make sales of their weapons, what we're saying basically is that there are nations and corporate entities that deliberately create wars to just sell their weapons, and they perpetuate the system and they make it an economic activity. And by so doing, they sacrifice the lives of the people. Literally, they sacrifice the lives of the people to just make money. On the flip side, when they are doing the wars and people are getting displaced left, right, and center. By the way, we're talking about millions being displaced across the world every year. Right now, we're saying there is over 72 million people displaced internally and externally across the world. And these people have been pushed out of their homes, their lands, and they live as refugees or internally displaced people across the world. Africa alone claims over 30 million people being displaced within and outside the continent. Today, I want us to focus on the refugee crisis that the world is faced with. After the people have been educated and have now known that these nations and corporate entities and global elites and sects create wars deliberately to displace the people, not really to displace the people, but just to make the sales of their weapons and everything else that they sell. On the flip side comes the refugee crisis, the refugee menace, and now with all these hundreds of millions of people being displaced across the world, the people, the organizations, the donors, the well-wishers that have been funding and keeping these refugee camps running have gotten tired. They've known the truth and they've cut their funding. We're talking about the US people. The people of the US have said going forward, the USAID is no longer going to be getting to these organizations or these camps where we have these displaced people and they need these services critically, these resources critically. The US, through the Trump's America First policy, which is not very welcome, is not very settling, but they've said in black and white that they're not going to be supporting these camps anymore. The US withdrew from the WHO. They withdrew from the WFP, or they cut funding in the WFP. By the way, the people of the US contributed over 50% of the donations that go into the World Food Program. 50%. Now they've cut their funding, and so have so many other organizations and individuals, after learning that indeed these wars are deliberate and it's a perpetual system that is never going to stop, and it's an exploitation, it's a system of exploitation, right? So individuals, organizations, and nations are cutting the funding for World Food Program, WHO, and the UNCHR that supports the refugees across the world, because it is a gimmick. And when I talk about the disaster that the world is faced with, where are we going to take these hundreds of millions of people? Because that industry is now collapsing. And by the way, the WFP and the UN in general, the UN particularly is the beast. The UN is the beast. And you see, the problem is And there's quite a great deal of points to say about this, just that I don't have the time. We're gonna do it gradually, part by part, okay? But I want you guys to know that at the center, at the core of the suffering across the world is the UN, the United Nations, with all these organizations, all these wings. Those are the limbs of the beast. Those are the limbs of the beast. It is at the center of the suffering that there is in the world. You better believe it, but it's okay. I said we're gonna be tackling topic per topic, or we're just gonna do it in parts. And in the end, we'll educate ourselves on what exactly the UN is doing and how significantly is it involved in the world chaos that we see, all these conflicts, all these displacements, all this suffering, all these disasters. So nations have realized that this is a game. They've withdrawn their funding, and now these camps, these refugee facilities that have been dependent on these nations and these organizations and these individuals that have been funding them, now are left desperate, like completely desperate. They don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have healthcare services, all the essentials. They don't have anything now to live on. So we created a system, and now the system has crashed, and everything is going down. And that's why I'm saying it's a global catastrophe. It's a global catastrophe. It's a big problem. Personally, I can only imagine where we're going with this. And I don't know who's going to come in to repair the system, because it's been a system of deceit, a system of exploitation. And now the truth is coming out, and the people are seeing it, and they're saying, we won't fund you anymore. And is a big problem that the world is faced with. I would like to get your views on what you think about this refugee mess that we've created for ourselves artificially, and what really the world is looking at. Like, what is the future of the world? Because we don't anticipate that there will be peace going forward. I mean, if anything, the greed is just getting crazier, right? The selfishness is just getting crazier. The decadence, we've lost this as a people. We've just lost it. So yeah, just write your comments below. Let me know what you guys think about the future of the refugee world that we've created for ourselves. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and remember to share, follow, and subscribe.